Welcome everyone to the Brass Spring 2023 Online Symposium. I'm Angel Truesdale, the Chair of the Business Reference and Academics Libraries Committee for Brass and the Chair of the Symposium Subcommittee. Thank you to our subcommittee, Christy Cunningham, Brian Garrison, and Christine Pollock. All sessions will be recorded and sent out to those who have registered. Please mute your audio and video as we get started. Thank you for spending time with Brass and our presenters today. Now I would like to turn it over to my colleague, Christine, to get us started.
Hi, thank you, Angel. And thank you everybody for coming. So I'm Christine Pollock. I will be moderating today or for this session. So I'm just going to very briefly introduce our next presenter, Nicolette Brandt from California State University, Long Beach. And I'm going to turn it over to her so she has most of the session.
All right, great. Thank you so much. Thank you everybody for being here. My name's Nicolette. I'm the librarian for the College of Business at California State University, Long Beach. So I'm the sole business librarian there, and there's over 4,000 undergraduate students. We have over 500 MBA students. We offer many different degrees, departments, so it's quite a big load. But before I really jump in, I'm going to share a link to a Google Drive. So here you can find all of my speaker materials for today. There's some links, and I'll add more links too later on. And then there's links to my slides as well. So you can find that all there. So I'm going to jump in. This is called I Am Throwing Away My One-Shot, Transitioning from a One-Shot to Embedded Model of Instruction in a Business Communication course. So this is about, kind of starting in this one-shot environment and then switching to a different kind of model. So I do have this, I am trying Slido out for the first time for this presentation. So you can engage in the chat, the regular Zoom chat. But you could also send your Q&A questions to Slido. I'll be doing a few polls, and I'll stop periodically to, kind of get some feedback on those polls. And here's the QR code. And then you can also go to slido.com and use this number right here, enter that in, and then you'll go straight into the live Q&A. So it's a little bit easier just to monitor since, Christine is helping me, but going through the chat can be a little bit difficult.
Nicolette, have you started your slides you're sharing yet?
Oh, not yet. Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Thank you for letting me know. All right, here you go. So this was my first slide. This is now my second slide. So here is that QR code, the link, and the number. All right. And I'll be sharing the QR code later too when we do the poll, so no rush to get it. All right, cool. Okay, so this is what I'm going to be going over today. Why I moved away from a one-shot model, how I got instructional faculty support, 3 key tactical takeaways for communicating with stakeholders, how to use alignment and mapping to cultivate your collaborative capital, and I'm going to wrap it up with a collaborative Padlet toolkit for information literacy advocacy. So this story starts, I'll tell you a little bit about, the story starts with a course that I teach. It's IS 301 Business Communication. I'll give you a little bit more information about that course in a second, but these are kind of the main, these are the learning objectives for their main research assignment. So conduct research in library databases, identify credible information and data related to a specific business problem, use APA style guidelines to format citations. So I'm wondering, do these look familiar to anybody? These objectives here, these are the instructions in the assignment itself. Yeah, pretty universal. So students are expected to leave the one shot, kind of with these competencies, knowing how to do these things. So I'm curious, you could put in the chat, how many learning objectives do you see here? 3, 5, 4. I know this is kind of like a trick question, it feels like. Okay, so when I look at this, this is how many that I could fit on the slide learning objectives that I see. So I see so many that are packed in there. And going through this in a one shot is really difficult. Really difficult. And so the course that I'm talking about is kind of my crown jewel course, Information Systems 301 Business Communication. It's an upper division course and it's required for all business students. So the research workshop that I teach is a component required for accreditation. There's 28 sections and over 800 students that I kind of reach through this class in just one semester, because there's 28 sections and there's about 30 students per section. So this means that once a semester, I teach the exact same information session 28 times in a row over the span of 3 or 4 weeks. I can't really switch up the content too much because it's the same course with the same, learning objectives, the same research project, and the same timeline. So the first course can't be, my first session can't be too far away from the last session, or else the people in the last session won't get what they need to finish their research assignment. So I'm sure that a lot of you are familiar with this scenario. I love instruction. I love in-person instruction. I like online instruction. I like it all. I like one-shots in the right context. I think that workshops, they're very useful in the right context. And I don't necessarily want less instruction, but I wanted more quality instruction. And in this kind of context, these are kind of the things that I felt. I felt like I was barely able to graze the surface of anything. My calendar is like completely monopolized by this one course. And by the 15th session, I'm completely tired of hearing myself talk because it's like one after the other, like 4 one day, 4 the next day, 4 the next day, it's like, and it feels a little bit like our students even getting anything out of this, especially when those students, they come to consultation after the workshop and, their first question is like, how do you get to the library website? Things like that, which I understand because it's just so much information to take in one class. And I really like to be innovative with my instruction. I like to try new things, but in this kind of scenario, there's really no time for active learning or trying new instructional strategies. And with this course, it's the time that I really want to do that because I'm reaching so many students. Like I want them to learn really value. I want the learning to be meaningful. I don't want them to go to a library workshop and feel like, oh, another library workshop. I want it to be really meaningful because I'm reaching so many students in this class. So these were kind of on this title slide here, you'll see the seeds of disruption. That's how this started. So these are kind of my seeds of disruption. Like I really, really enjoy teaching, but just this format, it wasn't working. This model's not working. And I know that there's a better way to teach this, but how do I get the instructors on board? So here's the first poll question. We'll try Slido out. So I wanted to ask you if you have any seeds of disruption. So these could be positive. These could be like, I want to try new things, or they could be, more like mine, which are kind of these calendar monopolization. So if you can go to that QR code, or you could go to slido.com and use this number. I'm going to switch over to my Slido screen right now. Oh, let me let me activate that. Okay, so that should be activated. And I can put the link directly to this question in the chat as well. I see that Steve resonates with this. Yeah, the communication classes. First year, yeah, also have 28 sections. Students lose interest. Badging. Badging seems like a really cool opportunity. That seems like the point of like disruption, kind of offering badges for kind of like micro learning. Lack of retention, it's gone stale. All of these things also are going through my head. Burnout, exhaustion. Yeah, by the like, 18th section, I'm like, I can't do this anymore. How am I going to do this for 5 more sessions? And then how am I going to do this every semester for the rest of my career? Because I plan on being at my institution for a while. I really like my job and where I'm at. It's just this one thing. Limited surface coverage, yeah, board students. So that seems to be getting a lot of words here. All sections in one day. 30 minutes, many objectives. Yeah, it's a lot. And it's difficult to temper expectations, I think, because I do want to give students all of the information. I don't want them to not succeed on their research project. And this is the only time that they're really going to have that one-on-one interaction or that in-person interaction. And so reducing the number of resources that I'm giving them, I'm like worried that they're not going to get what they need. So it seems like we're all kind of feeling the same about that. So I was thinking, I need to change this up. This has to switch up a little bit. And so that's kind of what I'm going to go into next about how I did that. So I'm going to go back to our slides. All right. So this is my opportunity for change. So this next part 2, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be going over the 3 tactics that kind of my takeaways for ways to get support for new ideas from instructional faculty. But this is mixed in, it's kind of weaved in with my story. So my story does not align exactly with these takeaways. They're kind of lessons that I learned throughout it. So this was kind of my process here, all of the squiggly lines. This is where I want you to be. Hopefully after you kind of have these takeaways or hear these takeaways, you can see that this is really messy. This is still, it has some loops and some curves because that's how it's always going to be, but it's a little bit less tangled. So that's what I'm hoping for this next part. So the 3 tactics to get new support for new ideas that my takeaways were after this experience, which I'm going to share more about to you. So I was able to transition into a different model, an embedded model, which I'll go over more in detail. But these are kind of the main takeaways. So synchronized change. So what I mean by that is investigate kind of the larger system that you're in and seek opportunities for if a course is changing, if a course is transitioning from one thing to the other, that's a good time to kind of jump in and piggyback on that change, and be proactive about collaboration. Ask if you can collaborate on that kind of change, and then create a shared vision. So reframing buy-in as alignment. I feel like a lot of the times as librarians, we're talking about getting buy-in, but if you adjust that kind of frame of thought to aligning with the goals of the course and the goals of the institution, then it becomes a lot clearer to instruction faculty and to admin, how these information literacy goals and objectives that you're envisioning align with theirs and how it's going to make things better. And sometimes that means thinking outside of the box a little bit. So also propose structured flexibility. So change is usually really hard, and making small adjustments is sometimes necessary. You have to be flexible. And part of being flexible, though, is being so clear with the instructions, like so structured. I found that faculty members, they have a lot on their plate. So do we. We all have a lot on our plates. But since we're the experts in this type of design, like instructional literacy design, then we can make those instructions really abundantly clear for them when we do change things. So I'm going to go more into synchronized change. So what I mean by this is I was in this situation where I was teaching all of these 28 different courses back to back. And what happened with this course is it was transitioning from what we call basically just a normal core course to a writing intensive course. And I'm sure that all of you have some type of course like that at your institution, a writing intensive course. So everything pretty much had to change. The curriculum for that course had to change. We have what's called a standard course outline that had to change. Their assignments had to change to meet the goals of this writing intensive policy, basically to get approved for that. And so at that point, I reached out to the lead or to the coordinator for the course, and I asked if I could collaborate or be a part of the task force for developing the new kind of curriculum. And that's an idea that I can't take credit for. Jennifer Bodichair gave me that idea because I was lucky enough to be in the brass what is it? I'm blanking on it, mentorship program, the mentorship program last year. And so it kind of came at the perfect moment because I was like, you know what, I can do that. I can reach out and I can ask if I could be a part of this task force. So that's what I did. And they said, yeah, sure. You know, I thought that I was going to have to give more explanation about why or what my kind of, qualifications were, but they were pretty on board with it. So, but this kind of for me happened it was pretty haphazard. You know, I really didn't know. I started in my position about a month before the pandemic, and I still feel like I'm catching up a lot about kind of the institutional, I guess, structure and how things are done and how things work at my institution. So in hindsight, I wish that I would have known about these I wish I didn't even know that courses transition from a regular course to a writing and like intensive course, but there can be so many different ways that you can kind of like piggyback on that if you know about those changes. So I did some investigation on our website and I realized that I have access to a portal where I can see who's like submitting changes to their curriculum. And from there, I can actually be the person who's, you know, asking to collaborate. And I think collaboration is a key word. You're going to join in as a collaborator to kind of help improve the curriculum. So that's how kind of locating windows of opportunity to collaborate and then being proactive about collaborating. So seeing those things come in advance, I think would have really helped me to make these changes sooner. Because I didn't really, the writing intensive transition, I didn't really hear about until it was later on in the process. And I wasn't aware that there's so many strict deadlines for that process. And if something's not in the curriculum, once they get it written, then it really can't fit into the course. So those are things to be aware of, is that even if you want to implement change, sometimes the policy isn't going to allow that. So basically, that would be, you know, getting a big picture view. So who decides what's taught and how? Does policy or accreditation play a role? I learned that a part of this writing intensive transition, that written in our standard course outline for each course, there's like a number of different assignments that instructors can give, and they're mapped out like pretty specifically. And so if I were to come and say, oh, I want to introduce this new assignment, you know, that it almost won't work within that framework. And then are there any external trends or factors that can change or affect the curriculum? And can you turn this into an opportunity? So the way that I kind of did that is with all of the buzz about micro learning and upskilling and things like that. I kind of sold this new embedded model, which I'll talk about in a second, as this scaffolded upskilling kind of thing, where I was able to offer students more than what they were getting from the one-shot instruction without burdening instructors, because it was micro learning. So instructors weren't going to have to facilitate it. They weren't going to have to, you know, do anything. So kind of with this whole online, you know, transitioning to online, and everyone's a little bit more comfortable with that. I was able to kind of leverage that opportunity to make change. Also, our institution is currently switching LMS systems. So that's another kind of area of opportunity. A lot of instructional faculty what I found in my experience is that a lot of them don't have the time, or I don't know, they don't want to really learn how to use it. So if you become an expert in that LMS system, even just a little bit more than that, you can kind of communicate so clearly your goals and your aims and your objectives in a way to them, in a way where it's like, okay, well, I'm doing this and I'm also learning from you how to use this LMS system that I don't know how to use, so you can kind of be that co-collaborator in that way where you're teaching them how to do things. And then creating a shared vision. So I came in, with my I guess, information literacy warrior kind of thing. And, what I've learned and what I've read in a lot of research is that a lot of, information literacy is so vague. It's such a vague concept. And so really defining that for like listening to faculty members, kind of understanding what they know and what they don't know, how you can kind of bridge the gaps in their knowledge, will really help you leverage your collaborative capital. And my next slide is going to be about that. So collaborative capital is basically how you convince someone to collaborate with you. This is from an article I read from Harvard Business Review. So to convince someone to collaborate with you, he basically outlines these 6 things: subject matter knowledge, process knowledge, sweat equity, connections, access to funding, and image. So notice I only bolded the first 3 because the last 3 I definitely don't have. But I do have the sweat equity, and I do know that I'm new, to this, and I am willing to put a lot of work into any kind of changes that I propose. The process knowledge, I have a little bit more knowledge on LMS systems. So that kind of gave me some collaborative capital. And then the subject matter knowledge, I was able to look at their standard course outline. I asked for their syllabus, and I tried to create the connections with information literacy in a way that they would understand. And that's what I did here. So you can see here, I'll put this, I didn't put it in the Google Drive, but I'll put it in there so that way you can see it more clearly. But this is a basically alignment map. Has anybody ever, I didn't rank a poll for this, but has anyone ever made an alignment map before? You can just answer in the chat. Some yes, some no. Okay, cool. So basically what I did was I took all of their standard course learning or their student learning outcomes, and I put it over here. And then I tried to connect information literacy objectives using our business research competencies document to these student learning outcomes, basically, in a way that more clearly connected the role of information literacy to achieving these different things, like solving dynamic and complex business problems, like making ethical and fair evidence-based solutions, like shifting strategic uses of information to convey business messages in different contexts. So that's something that faculty said students were struggling with. They don't understand context. Making competitive business decisions, all of these things here, using data to inform and persuade in storytelling. So basically I went out and I did a lot of research, and I learned like the language that they're using. I went on the AACSB website and I watched videos of business people talking about business things. And I was like, you know what? There's so many information literacy skills and knowledge that I see here that probably someone else who doesn't have subject expertise in information literacy isn't seeing. And so that's kind of how I tried to make those connections. And then what I did from there is I aligned those to these activities. And these activities, they're kind of purposefully vague and flexible. It's kind of like my rapid prototype. I did not get any, before I listened to faculty, to the instructional faculty of IS 301, and I knew what their kind of pain points were, which were a lot of citations, getting students to understand context, using data in a more innovative way, or even just knowing how to integrate data at all into anything, storytelling with information and data, things like that. And so I tried to kind of weave these things together in these activities that I proposed to them. So I feel like this document alone really amped up my collaborative capital, because they saw this. Like, I kind of came into our meeting with this and they were like, oh, wow, yeah, this is a lot. And then so they ended up using some of these information literacy focused student learning outcomes in the standard course outline itself. I'll put the alignment map in the Google Drive. So that was really nice and affirming. And then I also mapped it to the exact week, because that was when I was in the meetings, a lot of the hesitation was like, well, where is that going to fit? You know, I don't have time. I think that what the instructional faculty were assuming was that I was going to give them these objectives and they were going to have to figure out how to implement them or how to integrate them. But I was like, no, I'll do that, you know, and just don't worry about it, you know. So that's kind of, I guess, putting in the sweat equity of doing that work and then just showing them rather than telling them all of that. And then, so these were all of the activities. So this was kind of the first process, and then it went to this. So propose structured flexibility. So provide flexible pathways for implementing change. So I had all of these activities planned here, you know, and they really liked them, but there's already activities that they have to do in the course anyway, you know. So they were like, we really want to try these because it's going to teach students how to make infographics and all of this stuff that we want to do. But we already have all of these assignments that we need to get to. So what I did was I gave them a mod. So what I did, basically what I ended up doing is I created these micro learning modules in Canvas that they can upload through Canvas Commons. So they go directly into their course. And each one went over a different kind of learning path, like using data to, or telling stories with data, or citations. You know, that citations was something that I barely got to get to in my one-shot instruction. I basically just got to point to like my research guide for citations, and that was that. But they had mentioned that students were really struggling with citations. So I was able to kind of put in sprinkle in the creative things by saying, like, you know, I'm going to have a module on citations, a whole module on citations, and it's going to be really good and they're going to learn everything. And then I was able to sprinkle in other things too, just like the basics of information literacy, like connecting information literacy in the workplace, things like that. And so how I did that basically was, I'm going to show this next. This is kind of broken up into different pieces, but if you go into the Padlet, you'll see an instructor guide for the modules. And basically what this guide tells them is that there's one required module, and that required module covers everything that I would have covered in the one shot and more. But they have the option every week of, or not every week, but you know, whenever they want, to include these different optional learning paths that were going to be micro learning paths. They're not going to be long. But if they wanted students to learn more about this particular topic, like using data, integrating data into their, you know, business reports, doing citations, all of these kind of other things, then they'd have that option and they wouldn't have to do anything. They would just have to click a green check mark and students would go into the module and do it, and they'd upload a certificate of completion through LibWizard, and that's all. You know, if instructors were really liked the lesson, they would have the option of doing like an extended activity. So I put in extended options. So I had an assignment for each one that would extend it. For example, the infographic assignment or the data. So I had a module on kind of data literacy, and that extended assignment was to make an infographic using data. And a lot of instructors had wanted to do that. And so they had the option of kind of extending that in class activity and taking them through Statista, which is one of the databases that we use, and kind of building an infographic. So that was an option that they could do. And And so this kind of flexibility, but still really structured. If you look at the instructor guide, it's like really laid out for them, all of the directions. That was definitely needed because there was a lot of like, there's a lot of anxiety when those kinds of big changes are made. And that adaptability is necessary to kind of fit in there, but then also the required module. So that way instructors know that they're not going to lose anything within this kind of process. So all of this leads up to becoming a librarian co-collaborator. So instead of, again, focusing on getting buy-in, what I'm trying to do is kind of trying to keep building this collaborative capital, and really become a collaborator in the curriculum design, in the instructional design, rather than as kind of like a last minute added, I guess, component is kind of how I feel most of the time, and communicating really the value that librarians have to give. I think that digital literacy is really important, like learning how to use the databases themselves, but then there's so much more underneath it. So many connections that we see that other people don't see between the importance of information literacy and data literacy and the workplace and things like that. So this is a project that I was really proud of, and thank you for everyone for putting the comments in the chat. So the time, so that's something also that was a takeaway that I should have mentioned in maybe in the flexibility part, but it's something that I'll add here. It took a really long time. So I think really big, and I did not map out enough time to design these modules. So the rollout ended up being not as expected. I implemented yet less units than I wanted to implement, because each module I wanted to make them really meaningful. And so I would say that each like micro learning module, and I'll share one in the chat for you in a second so you can kind of see it. Each one took me, a good like 2 weeks or 3 weeks to develop, because I was doing a lot of research and trying to connect the, meaningful like workplace how information literacy will connect to the workplace and like really impact students in their lives. I suppose that this was kind of a dual thing. I'm trying to communicate the importance of information literacy to faculty, but then also to students in these modules. So it was kind of a dual effort that took a lot of time. And again, I'll share one of those units with you. So I've shared this with you, and I really want to, I'm going to go into the Padlet next so we can kind of go through that, but I really wanted to get to know what you're most proud of in your work, your most recent work. So if you can go to the Slido, let me activate that poll. I'm going to move over. And this is activated. When a student has an aha moment. Consultations, yeah. Surviving your first year, that's a big one. I kind of sometimes feel like I'm still surviving my first year because I came in so close to the start of the pandemic that now that things are kind of, our campus is, back to normal. I've like never met anybody basically. So I feel like I'm still surviving my first year. Yeah, I love Canvas Commons is so useful and so easy to use. You could just send instructors a direct link to whatever you build. So I love that opportunity. Yeah. getting invited to faculty department meetings in the business school. Yeah.
We have 10 minutes left, Nicolette.
Okay, cool. Thank you for letting me know. All right, I'm gonna let people still, you could still add your accomplishments there because I want to read through them all. I'm going to, oh, I love it, making connections in the chat. Business information skills, yeah, that's cool. Okay, so I'm gonna go over to the Padlet now, kind of just to go over that. Let's see. This will be very quick, and I made it editable, I hope. So if anyone has any other information or insight that they want to share on, let's see, second. So kind of getting the message right. So I know this looks like it's a lot, it's everywhere, you know, all over this Padlet. But one of my other main takeaways was that, you know, coming up with this, it's good to have a little bit of everything, but when you're on the ground, there's so many, it's not, you're not just going to hand someone like a I don't know, a pamphlet or something on information literacy, you know, like the communication strategy involves nuance, I suppose, and getting into meetings, like verbal communication, basically just being prepared for anything. And so I tried to put as much here as I could that I used when I was kind of going through this process, and then also some of the outcomes that I did. So if you see here, this is a slide that I didn't put in my presentation, but these are my initial slides to the 28 instructors in IS 301, because I was basically making these decisions with the coordinator, not necessarily with the instructors. And so, you know, they weren't really involved in that process. So a year before that change took place, I created this presentation for them, so that way they would be prepared for what's to come. And then the instructor guide. I used a lot on the alignment from this book, Understand How Information Literacy is Experienced in the Workplace. I'm sure that many of you have read it. So that gave me a lot of really good, useful tools to use to align those learning objectives. I also put a backward design template. So I used basically the basis of a backward design kind of template blueprint to do that alignment. So I put that here, but I'll put mine in here as well. And then I just put other tips here that you can use. I also used a lot from design thinking. So I learned about design thinking as I was building these modules, and I was like, oh my God, there's so many cool methods. So I also linked a thing here to design thinking. So many cool methods, like understanding stakeholders and really communicating value to whatever it is that you're trying to provide. All right, so I will open the floor for questions.
Wait, yeah, Nicolette, there's a question in the chat that might be relevant to this.
Okay.
Do you have background on curriculum design, or how did you learn about it?
Okay, yeah, so that's something that I should have mentioned in the examining the system. I don't have a background in instructional design. I did reach out early when this project started to our instructional designers on our campus, which I didn't even know existed until, you know, until this project pretty much launched, or till I was like, you know, in this project. And I'm not even sure how I found out that they existed. I think it was just through word of mouth. And I was like, we have instructional designers that will work with us. So, you know, when you're kind of doing like a system kind of analysis, you know, try to find those partnerships on campus, those kind of cross-campus partnerships that can help you, and I don't know, like make your vision into a reality. So that really helped connecting with them. They gave me a lot of information. And then also contacting ATS, our academic technology services, because they taught me a lot about Canvas. And then I was able to go and translate that to the instructors. So kind of finding those people. And then also I went to a lot of instructional design workshops over COVID because that was pretty much the only thing that I could do. And so the backward design methods, like equity-centered design, things like that were a lot of things that I learned in just campus offerings during COVID. And then I've also just done some, independent, I guess, research, which I'm happy to share with everybody. I could put everything on the Padlet because I have a long list of resources on how to learn that. It's overwhelming though, because you learn how many different learning styles there are, and like there's constructivism and all of this different cognitivism, all of these different things, and it's a little overwhelming, but I will send. I ended up building my modules on what's called a 5E, I guess, model, which is like a model of engagement. So I'll send that over.
Okay. Yeah, there was another question a little bit further back in chat too. What made you decide on modules over perhaps creating a course guide or multiple LibGuides?
So I had tried to do that, and I find that there's a huge, for some reason, it's very difficult for students and faculty to remember how to use an external platform. So I think it's because they're not on the library website every day. Like I'm on LibGuides every day, and I forget how frustrating it could be, I guess, if you're like really wanting information and you just don't know what to click on. I had this similar experience. I was in a Canvas course, and I don't use Canvas every day for professional development. And since I don't use it every day, I like went in the course and I wanted to just get something quick, and I didn't know what to click on because I don't use it every day. And I was like, oh, I just like don't want to do this right now. I don't want to have to figure this out right now. So meeting them where they're at, in the Canvas, in their LMS environment, I think kind of helps to break down that obstacle of kind of just user experience.
There's one more question I saw in the chat. How sustainable does this model feel over time, and is there a lot of updating required?
So that's a good question. It feels pretty sustainable because it's just a libwizard. So what I did was I embedded a libwizard into pretty much every module. And so it's pretty much just the normal way that I would normally provide instruction anyway, just embedded into Canvas. So it feels a lot easier than going to 20 classes and like teaching the same thing over and over again. So even if I have to make small updates here and there, they're fun updates because it would probably just be like updating the content based on feedback, because I do have, some assessment, I guess, feedback questions at the end of each module from students on how helpful it is. So I feel like it's as sustainable as it was before.
That's great. That's a great point. You're saving some time and not having to do the one shots. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And it's fun to work on like e-learning and stuff and trying to like figure that out. Allison's question, does Brass? I don't know if Brass does, but I learned so much from going to the SpringShare website itself, because they have like 50 workshops a month basically on how to use SpringShare products. And they have a lot of documentation. So I went on their website and I scoured that for information and learned how to build different things.
We probably have time for one more question. We have like 1 minute left. Or was there anything you wanted to do to wrap up, Nicolette?
No, there was really nothing I wanted to do to wrap up besides just saying thank you everyone who came today. This is my first solo presentation, so a little bit nervous, but thank you all for being here. And then feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions, or if you want to learn more about the process, or if you want to see the modules that I built and kind of how they work. I'm happy to collaborate, and my email is all over everything that's in the Padlet and also in the Google Drive as well.
Yep, and I just placed the link to the Google Drive in the chat again, in case anybody missed it the first time. All right, thank you, Nicolette. You did great.